Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sylvester Bryant Byrd died on the morning of August 9th. He was 83. He was Antigua and Barbuda's first and longest serving foreign minister from 1981 to 2004, and then prime minister from 1994 to 2004. He will be interred tomorrow in Antigua after a state funeral at which the nation of Antigua and Barbuda will honor a very special son. Sylvester Byrd was a progressive thinker whose vast experience and knowledge as tourism minister, foreign minister, and prime minister served the people of the Caribbean well in the councils of CARICOM. Beyond any doubt, Lester Byrd is the architect of modern Antigua, responsible for successfully transitioning the country's economy from dependence on a defunct sugar industry into one of the leading tourism centers in the world. Under his stewardship, Antigua and Barbuda became a high-income country, transforming the quality of jobs and housing and introducing high-end tourist resorts. When he lost the general elections in 2004, Antigua and Barbuda had the lowest rate of unemployment in the Caribbean at just 5%. Many people had the luxury of 2 jobs. A very keen sportsman, he played golf in his later years, but his passion was cricket. He was a superb pace bowler with a strategic knowledge of the game. But his early triumph for Antigua and the West Indies was to win the bronze medal for long jump at the 1959 Pan American Games. At those games, incidentally, the United States copped most of the medals, but the West Indies was second in the medal table, ahead of Canada, Argentina, Brazil, and much larger countries than those of the Caribbean. In the end, it was those same legs that brought him that Caribbean glory that failed him. Afflicted by diabetes in his later years, one of his feet had to be amputated. For this once great athlete, who as a Caribbean leader had stood up in leading councils of the world, speaking out for his country's and the region's interests, the effect was devastating. Now, Lester Byrd was a committed regionalist. He inspired the establishment of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, a grouping of the smaller English-speaking countries of the Caribbean. He served twice as the organization's chairman. The first time, he was not yet a prime minister, but such was the confidence that leaders of the Eastern Caribbean reposed in him. He strongly influenced the decision to turn the Eastern Caribbean Currency Authority into a central bank that serves its member states so well today. He was convinced that the structures of unity and functional cooperation should be maintained in the OECS because the small size of the countries required unity for strength in regional and international bargaining. In the wider Caribbean, he was literally and figuratively a giant. It was under his leadership as the chairman of CARICOM that with Jamaica's P.J. Patterson and Barbados's Owen Arthur, the regional negotiating machinery was established for collective bargaining on external trade matters in 1997. When political differences threatened the cohesion of CARICOM, his was a healing hand and a soothing voice, as he was after the US-led intervention in Grenada in 1983, constitutional differences in St. Kitts Nevis, an electoral conflict in Guyana, and a political crisis in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 2001. Lester Bird did not pay lip service to the concept of Caribbean integration. He demonstrated his commitment by deeds. At the height of Antigua and Barbuda's economic success, his government opened Antigua's borders to receive migrants from other Caribbean countries at times of crisis, including people from Dominica, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the Dominican Republic. Celeste was also a firm believer in multilateralism, and especially in the United Nations organization. Making his country's first statement at the United Nations 11 days after Antigua and Barbuda's independence, he said this: "If there were no United Nations organization, there would not be dialogue, but dictation, not discussion, but direction, not negotiation, but instruction. Such a situation," he said, "would bring the world to grave conflict. Or if rationality is sacrificed for autocracy, reason will be replaced by resistance." He fought tirelessly for a bigger voice in the international community for small states, insisting on the right of small states to be heard and respected, saying that Antigua and Barbuda is but a speck in the ocean, a dot on the world map, and that the country was under no illusion that on its own it would have the power to affect world trends and developments. But he declared, "We will not sit on the sidelines of international debate. We intend to forcefully stand up for principles in which we believe." And that is the legacy he left to Antigua and Barbuda's foreign policy. The obligation always not to silently acquiesce, but to stand up for principles, for justice, and for right. That is why ours was one of the first voices raised to warn about the dangers of climate change and the threats that greenhouse gas emissions pose to the very existence of states. That is why our voice continues to be strong and loud today. It is also why Antigua and Barbuda took a strong position on institutional racism and against apartheid in South Africa, demanding one man, one vote, and the release from prison of Nelson Mandela. From the time of our independence, Antigua and Barbuda demonstrated its resolve to contribute to ending racist rule in South Africa by providing freedom fighters of the then banned African National Congress with Antiguan passports so that they could escape tyranny and travel. When he was free at last, Nelson Mandela publicly acknowledged Antigua and Barbuda's rule. On December 3rd, 1981, just 1 month after its independence, Antigua and Barbuda joined this Organization of American States, and Celeste delivered the nation's first statement to this body. He remarked on the colonial history that had divided Latin America and the Caribbean, but he emphasized the similarities of common heritage, aspirations, and problems, and urged that we reject the historic legacy of division by joining together to create understanding and establish brotherhood. At that time, both Belize and Guyana were denied membership of this organization because of claims to their territory by 2 existing member states. In calling for their inclusion, he told this organization that we have an opportunity to demonstrate as new states which urge the world to détente, which call for peace, that we have the capacity to practice what we preach and to find solutions to our own problems. And he rebuffed those who argued that it is in the nature of man to be aggressive and acquisitive by invoking the words of Simon Bolivar, who said, "If nature is against us, we shall fight nature and make it obey. His words continue to echo in our councils and in our hemisphere today. Sylvester played great value in the Summit of the Americas. He worked with leaders of the United States, Canada, and others to help forge a hemisphere built on cooperation and collaboration, one that upheld the sanctity of national independence, but recognized the value of hemispheric interdependence. But he was disappointed that while the summits promised much, their promise was not fulfilled, as the siren calls of nationalism, of protectionism, and of unilateralism proved too great for many to resist. In this connection, as long ago as the early 1990s, he argued against the exclusion of small states in the Caribbean and Central America from access to concessionary financing from international financial institutions. He decried the sole criterion of per capita income and pointed to our vulnerabilities, such as high reliance on one economic activity, susceptibility to natural disasters, and the need to continuously install and improve infrastructure to attract investment. But all those urgings too fell on deaf ears. Today, we are still struggling to overcome those same persistent problems. But Lester Bird never stopped drawing attention to them, forcefully and vigorously. He stood for some things that are important in the Caribbean and in the world, for democracy, for the rule of law, and for right over might. It is beyond question that Antigua and Barbuda, the Caribbean community, has lost a golden star in the Olympics of Caribbean achievement. On a personal note, I was his collaborator for 44 years. I have lost a friend. Antigua and Barbuda, the Caribbean, has lost a giant and a legend. Multilateralism, including this OAS, has lost a champion. His name will be carved on a tombstone, but his legacy is etched in the hearts and minds of generations of Caribbean people, in his advocacy of our interests and his commitment to our upliftment. That was Sir Lester Bryant Bird, a giant of the Caribbean. Thank you.